and half Ironman. California, the first exam April next year. You good? All right. It is 6:03, so we'll go ahead and get started. Want to welcome everyone, Adam and Casey and Elsie, to tonight's Planning Commission. Oh, we got a couple others. Welcome to the Planning Commission meeting. This is November 18th. We will go ahead and get started. Lewis, could you offer a prayer? And then afterwards, TJ, could you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance? Yeah. Thank you. Our Father in heaven, we are grateful this evening that we can gather together in this Planning Commission meeting. We're grateful for the circumstances we're able to meet under, and we're grateful for this wonderful community that we live in. We pray that as we meet tonight that we can review this agenda and the items that are before us and be able to make decisions that will help build this community and bring everyone together. We're grateful for the many blessings that we enjoy, and we pray for these things humbly and do so in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen. Amen.
Everyone, please stand.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Perfect. Thank you for your help with that. We will excuse Cherie and Christy tonight, and in their absence, we'll seat TJ and Lewis as voting members. So you guys are on the hook tonight. All right. We're going to move on to items number 1 and 2, which are consent items, which are just reviewing the meeting minutes from our last meeting, which was September 23rd, and then consideration of a request for a home occupation for an in-home hair salon. So with those being consent items, anything that you want to pull out and chew on, or can we put those ones to bed?
I'm good.
We got a motion from Lewis.
Sure.
Okay.
I'll second the motion that hasn't been made yet.
I'll motion to approve items 1 and 2, consent items.
Second.
Okay, we got a motion from Lewis and a second from Rich. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, items carry, or items pass.
One quick note.
Oh,
If
yeah.
anybody's here for the Preserve neighborhood meeting, it's in another room. Are you here for an item on the agenda? Okay, thanks.
He's here for the real action.
All right.
All right, action items number 3 and 4 have both been postponed. And so we're gonna move into item number 5, which is a public hearing item. So consideration of a request to rezone 3.25 acres located at 775 South, 1600 West from A2 agricultural residential and residential agricultural RA1 to general commercial GC1. Yeah.
We were here for item 4.
Oh.
Did you say you were skipping over that?
So, yeah, the property owners contacted us late this afternoon, and we're going to be unable to attend, and so it's going to be continued until December 9th. If you've got questions or concerns on it, contact me at the city, and I'd be happy to discuss that. I'm Sean Conroy. Okay. It probably wasn't me, but here's a. Let me hand this real quick.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, it was a last minute adjustment for that. Give me a call and we can discuss.
Okay. All right, thanks.
Sorry about that.
Oh, I mean, we got a really good meeting lined up.
Neighborhood meeting next door,
Yeah.
take your pick.
Wow,
You're welcome to.
that's dedication. All right. So we got a rezone. We will turn the time over to Sean on this item.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the commission. So this site is about 3¼ acres in size. It's located on Highway 89 and 8th South. Just to the north is the new middle school. This is the existing zoning for that area. The subject property, the front 3/4 of it is zoned A2, and there's that small section towards the east that's zoned RA1. Surrounding properties, you can see in the red, most of the stuff on Highway 89 is general commercial, and then the residential to the east and to the south. This is the existing general plan. that was adopted a couple of years ago. The kind of that pink area that includes the subject site is in the flex designation. If you recall, the flex designation was meant to allow a property owner to propose either a commercial or a residential use. We really identified the key intersections where we wanted to ensure commercial, and then the in-between areas was kind of at the discretion of the applicant to make a proposal. So the applicants are requesting to rezone the property to general commercial. They have not yet identified a specific project for the site. They're really trying to get the zoning in place so they can better market and find out what type of uses may fit there the best based on the market. The zoning ordinance does require the submittal of a concept plan, and so they have prepared a concept plan, but again, this is not something they're proposing. It was put together just to see how a particular project could potentially lay out on the site. So what you're really reviewing tonight is just the rezone, and assuming that the project gets the property gets rezoned, you should assume that any of the uses that are allowed in the general commercial zone could potentially be proposed in this location.
Okay.
But pretty straightforward from a general plan perspective. Staff supportive of the request and would recommend that you recommend approval to the City Council.
Okay, thanks, Sean. One question I had is, the flex zone is still under the same requirements for the commercial design standards?
Yeah, so the flex zone is not a zone, it's a designation in the
Yeah.
general plan.
Okay,
So it would fall under either a commercial, which we're proposing now, and the commercial does fall under those standards,
okay,
or a residential,
Okay.
if that was the proposal.
okay. And is this one plat right now?
It's one parcel.
Or one parcel? Yeah, okay. All right, do we have any other questions for Sean? This one is a public hearing item, so let's pepper Sean with any questions before we open it up. I mean, the White House, I mean, that's a staple in Mapleton. Yeah, I don't know if we can allow the White House to go.
Torn down before it gets designated as a UNESCO site.
Yeah.
UNESCO site. Federal, international.
That's a big deal.
Yeah.
If that gets qualified,
What's that website to fill that information out?
Yeah. All right, well, doesn't sound like we have any questions for Sean. Adam or Casey, do you have any context that you would add as the applicants? Oh, okay. Okay. And this is technically a public hearing item, so, I mean, if you got a soapbox you want to hop on, here's your chance.
I don't know enough about that parcel.
Okay. All right. Well, we'll go ahead and close public comment then. By virtue of no one really having any strong opinions, this one also seems pretty straightforward. So I guess,
It's the general plan.
yep.
I'll go ahead and make the motion. I propose that we recommend approval to the City Council for the rezone for property from A2 to RA1, A2, RA1 to GC1.
Okay.
Second.
All right, we got a motion from Rich and a second from Jake. All those in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Okay, item passes. Thanks, guys.
Thanks.
All right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's all recorded.
Yeah.
Thanks for,
On YouTube, Casey.
What's that?
It's on YouTube if you want to rewatch it.
Yeah. All right, we will move on to item number 6, which is consideration of an amendment to Mapleton City Code, section 18.84.130, regarding fencing standards. Riveting.
Yeah.
We'll give this one back to Sean.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the commission. So some of the existing fencing standards now, you can have a fence height between 3 to 4 feet in your front yard. Side yard and rear yard is limited to 6 feet in height. There isn't currently a distance requirement from the back of the sidewalk. So what we're proposing is to require a 2-foot minimum setback from the back of sidewalk or a public trail. This is really what we're trying to avoid. You're seeing these pop up more and more in town as we're developing more and more, and we're just, the proposal really is to make a more aesthetic appearance on the streetscape, but also if a kid is on a bike or, you know, there's more than one, there's people passing, having the fence directly to the back of the sidewalk does create a little bit of a safety concern. And so our proposal would be to create, you know, more like this, a small buffer that gives a little more space and could potentially be landscape, something like that.
Makes sense.
So that's what we're reviewing tonight. I think the main key you guys may want to discuss is 2 feet too much. What happens on a corner lot is a home's facing one street and then they can fence 6 feet from the front of the house back. And so often that area is their backyard. And so we didn't want to create a larger buffer that would eat into that backyard, but we wanted to have enough space that you've got a little bit of that buffer that improves that appearance.
Do other cities have an ordinance similar to this? With
Yeah, and they vary pretty widely. Some are pretty strict as far as requiring much larger than a 2-foot buffer that has to be fully landscaped. We didn't feel like that was necessary, especially because oftentimes that eats into people's usable backyards. This is the trail in Spanish Fork on 16 South. That's a 2-foot buffer as well. That's pretty consistent.
So that would be the property owner's responsibility to landscape and maintain that 2-foot strip?
It would. The only instances where they wouldn't is on like Highway 89, where the city's going to maintain it because it's the rear of those homes. But for the most part, we're talking corner lots, so the property owner would be responsible.
So Sean, where's this coming from? Like, why is this all of a sudden becoming?
Yeah, just seeing more
I mean,
of this.
because I may be alone on this, but I don't think that looks bad.
I don't
I
either.
think it looks really good.
There's a safety
And
concern.
I don't
with-
see the
with
safety concern.
Fence like this.
what-
One example, over by where my parents live, it's on the way to Sean's house. When I come out of the street, I go to look to view right, and I can't see anything until I get halfway out into the intersection because that fence is all the way on the sidewalk.
Gotcha.
And so it blocks the whole line of sight view. And so I've almost hit people 2 or 3 times in that intersection. But where this is, I don't know, can you open it up to more of a, I don't know, I see the safety concern, so I'm for it, but
Like I said, 2 feet maybe too much. That's something you could discuss.
Well, I mean, even
But-
1 foot, I mean, the homeowner still has to maintain that. I think in a lot of cases, it's going to become a weed patch rather than something that's nicely maintained.
What's happening
So-
now is even with those that abut it, it's a weed patch. And so that was part of our concern too, is on things like this, there's nothing to really maintain. It just has weeds that come through. Whereas if you have a little bit of a buffer, you're at least giving them the opportunity to plant something. But
If they
your
just put
points are,
weed barrier and gravel.
that's, the ordinance says you could, it's got to have a weed barrier, and then you can have gravel, mulch, anything like that would be appropriate, but certainly open to whatever the commission wants to recommend.
I think my opinion's more aligned with Lewis's, but I would say a 1-foot buffer, maybe if you want a buffer. When I was a kid, riding along and all of a sudden you have a fence right there and your pedal catches the fence and you're head over heels over the handlebars. And so I can see the need for a buffer, but I don't know. I'm a strong proponent of letting people do with their property what they want, for the most part.
Yeah. Well, this is a public hearing item, and maybe our token public citizen
Oh, he does.
might have an opinion on this.
I actually don't have an opinion too much about this, but I would prefer seeing some kind of a buffer. It makes sense from a line of sight
Yeah.
when you get to the intersections, because I've definitely
That part makes sense.
seen cars that just seem to appear really suddenly.
Yeah.
So I would
The
go.
ordinance already allows for, if you can see the very end of that fence, it
It's
drops
shorter.
to 3 feet.
Yeah.
And that's for your line of sight at the intersection. So there is a fencing ordinance for intersections that allows for line of sight, but I agree.
3 feet seems like it might be a bit tight for line of sight stuff, especially
For the
depending
Lamborghini
on the
drivers,
speed
yeah.
of the road.
Or even little kids on bikes. Sometimes those little guys are less than 3 feet.
And if the fence is 6 feet high till it hits the front yard and they don't do the 3-foot section, then you have a kid that only has the sidewalk distance when they run out of the road and a car to stop in time. So giving 2 extra feet makes a big difference if they're running after a ball from their front yard.
Yeah.
I actually have a question about another thing that was part of this, your first slide here, and it was about the height of where I live, I'm just east of Ira Allen Park in that Monte Vista subdivision, and then there's the Hillcrest subdivision that's just to the east of me. And so it starts going up a hill right there, and we have deer all the time. And so this 6-foot height, my fence line is at the level part, and then this hill comes up, and these deer, with a 6-foot fence, their heads are already way above my fence. So I'm wondering, what would it take for me to do like an 8-foot fence on that back piece? Because my neighbor built a 3-foot high retaining wall, and then he put a fence on top of that. So an 8-foot fence for me wouldn't even be visible to them.
Yeah.
Is that possible? Like I don't know if it's a waiver or some sort of a.
Is 6 the minimum?
6 is the max.
Oh, it's the max.
Unless you put a basketball court back there, then you can do 10, right?
Yeah, if you have a sports court or something like that.
The
But we-
ordinance allows for a retaining wall, right? If the grade is higher, he could put a retaining wall up to
Up to the grade.
the grade.
Yeah, the requirement is 6 foot, so you'd have to make some amendment that would have some, and maybe that's something you look at, is you could go up to 8 if the grade is a certain a certain amount higher at your rear yard, or have some deer fencing standard. I have seen some cities that allow for an additional 2 feet, but it has to have some openness to it, so it's not a solid 8-foot wall.
Not opaque.
Oh,
Yeah.
right,
So anyway, I can come talk to you about
Yeah,
that.
sounds good.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Your list gets longer of items to hit.
That's right, we're gonna spend a lot of time. But it's not a bad idea to, that's something you could recommend, is to look at some additional criteria that would allow you to go up to 8, and we can work on that before it goes to city council.
It's hard to pin down the criteria because everybody's topography is so different. And so, I don't know how you would articulate that.
So let's go back to this 2-foot buffer then. I think there's some pros and some cons to both. Has anybody's opinion changed to the point where we want to put, and this ultimately is going to go to city council regardless. So they might blow it up with their own opinions.
Honestly, I don't mind the two-foot buffer. I don't
Yeah,
mind.
yeah. I mean, I can probably get past it. I just didn't know. Jake brought up a great point that I really hadn't thought much about from that perspective, so I think that's a valid.
The pumpkins on top of the posts, I'm not sure about though.
That's more of a hazard than.
Let's include that in the code.
That invites the deer.
Yeah.
That's the problem.
Well, I'll go ahead and accelerate the conversation, so I'll propose a motion to pass the standard, or the 2-foot setback for the fencing.
Just out of clarification, is that the only thing that we need to address on this one?
Yes.
Is just that?
Unless you want to direct us to look at an 8-foot side or rear variance addition.
I think it makes sense. We've had public comment.
Yeah, I don't think it would hurt to do that.
Let's address that before it goes to city council.
We can do that.
So would I include that in this motion? So also to include a motion, or included in the motion, some kind of variance or revision associated with 8-foot fence or deer fencing extension.
Deer migration. Or
Deer, yeah. Okay. I feel sorry for April, who's got to transcribe this, but
She's good.
Yeah.
She's super good.
All right, so that's the motion.
I'll second.
All right, so Jesse motion, TJ second. All those in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. Okay, item passes. All right, we will move on to item number 7, consideration of amendments to the city's transportation master plan. And I'll send it back to Sean.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the commission. So the transportation plan includes a map that has all of the roads existing and proposed, at least the major roads in the city. It establishes the street hierarchy. You know, arterial is the most significant, that's Highway 89, your collector streets like Main Street, 16th South, Maple Street, major residential, and then minor residential, and the new one that we're proposing is the Country Lane. Transportation plan really helps us with, you know, when developers come, they propose a subdivision. We look at the transportation map to see what kind of right-of-way is required, what roadways need to be improved. So that's part of the purpose of the transportation plan, as well as informing the public on what plans are in the future for our roadways. This is the existing transportation plan map. It's a little hard to see on here. On this map, you know, you've got your arterial, which is 89, and then these other kind of pink colors are the collector roads, and residential is the blue and the lighter brown in there. Hopefully you've been able to review this in your packet. It's gonna be a little hard to review on this overhead. So our proposal with this modification is just to update the plan to make sure that what's happened with development over the last 5 or 6 years since the plan was last reviewed gets updated. And then we've also, as I mentioned, included the new Country Lane cross-section. The Country Lane is meant to be for existing areas of town that are low density, that don't have curb and gutter and sidewalk, that will stay that way to try to maintain that rural character, or a new subdivision that's 1 or 2 acre lots or larger, that's gonna stay low density and want to maintain that kind of Country Lane appearance. The Nemelka subdivision we did at the mouth of the canyon was like that. We used this similar cross-section with that. Revised updated plan, I can hit on, I went through some of the changes in the staff report. We can hit on those if you have any specific questions. Really the biggest change is identifying those country lanes, and there were some modifications to the collectors and major residential, but not anything drastically different from the previous plan. Probably best just to go through questions if you have any.
I had a question on one of those. That was the last bullet point there. The 1600 north from Main Street to east was downgraded to a country lane. Is that correct?
So from
Because
12
it's a UDOT
east.
road.
I think it's
So
actually
You're
from-
talking 1600 south?
No, it says on here 1600 north from Main Street, and that doesn't sound right.
Oh,
That doesn't sound right.
Oh, yes, I apologize. It's not it's 1600 north where 1900 east turns. You know, where it's super narrow next to that's the country
Okay,
lane
that
section.
makes more sense, because I was like, no, 1600 north is not a country
Yeah.
lane. So,
Yeah, it's just that northeastern section.
yeah.
Speedway from the
Yeah.
junior high and the middle school, or the elementary.
Yeah, thanks for that catch.
Yeah, so, okay, that makes more sense.
Is there a cross-section of the country lane standards?
There is, yeah, it's 28-foot asphalt, and then there's a drainage swell.
Is the drainage concrete drainage swell?
Mhm.
But then there's no requirement for sidewalk?
Correct.
So there is a concrete drainage swale, or is it just a vegetation?
No, it's just a vegetated swell.
So it's not required to be concrete?
No, sorry, yeah, it's meant to be more natural. You could grass it, landscape it.
Melka's subdivision at the end of, what was that,
Eight-
Fourth?
400?
400.
They had the concrete swell though, right?
They didn't have the concrete swell, they had,
Natural vegetation.
yeah,
So as it goes up 400,
They put in-
their subdivision.
they put in some drainage
The
rock.
place
for
where
the-
they did the concrete swell was by Sheranians. Up towards Quiet Meadow Lane on the right-hand side, when.
Or Laura's house?
Yeah, they did the concrete swell there.
I had a question on 1900 east with, that one just seems really narrow. And I don't even know, is that just, I think it's designated as a country
Country lane.
lane.
Mhm.
Is that the long-term plan for that as well?
It is, because you've just, the issue is just the constraints. You've got wetlands all on one side, and you're
Yeah.
right up against the mountain on the other side. And so it would be a pretty monumental effort to
Yeah.
widen the road and put in improvements.
Did we put some teeth in the horse development, that there's like no on-street parking?
Yeah, and they've got to, it's their responsibility to put in the actual speed
Oh, that's right.
signs.
Oh, we did
So
the
that-
solar powered
Yeah, so
warnings.
they'll be putting those in.
That's
before
right.
the completion, so that'll,
That's a pinch point for sure.
No matter what, I mean.
And traffic is increasing right there so much. Eventually, it's gonna have to get addressed, but
Yeah.
that'll require the Army Corps of Engineers. It will.
yeah.
The sidewalk master plan, that's a totally separate document, right?
Correct.
Okay. If you guys haven't seen that, that's good literature. No, really, because you drive around Mapleton and you're like, we need a plan on sidewalks. And when I saw that, it was comforting to know that Stephen and Sean have got that on their radar.
All we need is
A lot of
$5 or
money.
$6 million.
Yeah, I know.
Address all the start and stops and the dead ends and the.
Yeah. Lewis?
The biggest challenge with sidewalk is it's not just the sidewalk, right? You're widening the road, you're stubbing utilities, you're burying power lines, you're burying or piping irrigation ditches, you're buying right away. So it's a pretty big effort anytime.
Just $5 or $6 million.
Is there a
Lewis, can you just get your checkbook out?
Yeah,
Thank you.
let's
For
get that
future
tomorrow.
development, that a developer can't designate a road as a country lane standards to reduce their cost of curb gutter sidewalk? Is there like a traffic plan that's required to be tied to it, so you can't say, let's turn a major road off of like 12th East into a country lane? It's gonna be a collector road anyways, because it's gonna connect, I can't think of a subdivision, a future subdivision that would say it really actually can't be a country lane, but the developer's trying to, so how do we put a restriction on it to say, we need a traffic study that says it will meet the country lane standards?
So,
By lot size, right?
yeah, it's not officially by lot size, but that's the intent in the subdivision ordinance. The roads that you see here all are major collectors and major residential. So if a new subdivision's going in, obviously on any of those, they're gonna have to meet the standards that are there. Where you might get somebody proposing a country lane is an undeveloped area that doesn't have any proposed roadways going through it, and that review would be at the discretion of the planning commission and city council.
So Fourth North is considered a collector road though, right?
Yeah.
So the Melka subdivision
So that,
is off of a
So-
collector road.
so yeah, the section from 2000 East up is proposed as the country lane, and that's,
But
and then
into the
also
subdivision, it's not country lane?
into the subdivision as well.
There's gotta be some transition though from a collector into the subdivision to downgrade it into.
That's further down the street.
Further down the street.
Yeah.
Sean, how come is like Peterson Lane going to be a country lane and places like the Preserve not?
So the Peterson Lane is, what we really did is looked at where are the existing roads that have no curb gutter or sidewalk. Peterson Lane is one of those. And so that one we kept as a country lane as it's already built and is dead-ended and not going anywhere else. The Preserve's already developed out quite a ways. You know, all the roads coming into it from both sides are already built as, you know, with curb gutter, sidewalk, street widening.
How about from Main Street, from Maple all the way to 1600 South? Would that be designated a country lane,
From Main Street to,
like 1600 South?
no, that's a collector,
The collector, so any new improvements that tie into that will have to curb gutter and sidewalk.
correct. Yeah, and there certainly would be options on minor residential roads if an applicant says, hey, can we propose a country lane? And that's something that the commission and the council were supportive of. Yeah, that's a pretty easy discussion. I think what you would be concerned about is somebody supposed to be on a major residential road or something like that and trying to get away from costs by proposing the country lane. But that's where city engineer, planning commission, city council would have the discretion to require those.
So on the country lane, how much of, from the road, how much space does the swell require? And can people develop that at all, like put up fences right in that area, or shrubs or trees? What my concern is that 1600 South is really busy, and it's gonna get busier as the preserve grows up. And that's a route that my kids take often, and there's not an easy way for them to safely navigate
Yeah.
along that. And so this designation to me seems like what we're avoiding is the cost to protecting the kids, not necessarily maintaining that feel.
Yeah.
And,
that's a segment that you certainly could look at as saying, hey, maybe we want something different. I think as we looked at it, and the likelihood of getting improvements all the way up that road were not very high. But that's certainly one you could consider.
as part of the ordinance, can you maintain that has to stay open, that swell space has to be available for people to walk on so that they're not
Yeah.
out in the road?
Correct. The fencing couldn't happen beyond that, beyond the swell. The swell's 8 feet.
Okay.
That's a good example, because 1600 South is a country lane for half of it, and then a major collector
Yeah.
on the other half, once you hit Main Street.
Starts at Main Street, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of obstacles,
Oh, yeah.
like there's not so people are out on the road because there's no easy way
Yeah.
to navigate, and
Yeah, a lot of people bike and run up that.
And it's an interesting one because the properties are primarily all developed on that stretch. And so that was part of the reasoning behind this, is that, you know, if one property owner comes in, do we really want to require them to put in curb, gutter, and sidewalk when all the other properties are already developed and we'll either have to go in and do that ourselves? That's part of the thinking behind it, but you certainly could designate it something, you know, more of a major residential to Nemelka Lane or something.
What's the determination from side of asphalt to the swell? Because the curb and gutter actually creates a nice buffer between concrete and asphalt, whereas more people drive on that asphalt over time. If there's not a
Thanks.
buffer or something, that asphalt is going to continue to slough off and crumble. Is there a requirement for some sort of a, I don't know, metal strip or a, I don't know, what's the-
Yeah, typically they'll have a concrete curb still, it's just flush. So if you've driven through Emerald Estates, west of 8th West.
Okay.
It's a little wider road, but it's a concrete curb that's flush,
Okay.
and then there's a drainage swale.
just so I'm clear, so in the swell area, they can't plant trees, they can't.
No, you can landscape, yes, you could landscape.
But that's
the swell.
the
That's like a-
problem though, is then
it's
it
the-
forces people out on the road. And I think you've got to have some way for people to safely navigate, even if it's a country lane. That's my concern with this proposal. I like the idea. I mean, I
Yeah.
live in that country
Right.
lane area, and I do like that, but it's,
Mhm.
I get very nervous. Thankfully, the path is
Yeah,
along
if you
it
didn't have
too,
the
but-
path, you'd be even more precarious.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And 1600 is just going from the path down to Peterson Lane to get to Friends. We always worry because they have to be on the road and people drive super fast on that.
Well, I
country
wonder if
lane.
one of the options we would have is to keep it the country lane, but include on the city's trail plan a trail connection from Main to 16th. And that's something that would be a city-funded project. We could go out and get grants for, put in just the trail on one side of the street, because that may be the best-case scenario there.
And that's what they're doing basically from 400 north up to Whiting, right?
Yep.
So there will be
Yeah, that the trail will run actually all the way down to the existing trail eventually.
Are speed limits tied to these designations? So would a country lane go to a 25 since you don't have protection?
No, the speed limit would be based on volume, not necessarily designation.
What dictates volume?
But isn't the designation related to the volume?
It's intended to be, but there could be a situation where it's a major residential road that's getting traffic like a collector.
So that's the 1600 south.
Yeah,
basically.
I would agree. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, open to any thoughts on 16 South.
Who
that was-
picks the speed limits? Is that done by traffic study?
It's set in the code, but it's based on traffic studies, so yeah, we would go out and do a traffic study and then determine whether the speed limit is within the range of what that's intended.
I think your own suggestion to put some sort of a trail on 1600 South would be a good,
Yeah, I like that a lot.
Yeah,
at least one side
Yeah,
of the road has a
something
safe
there.
path to get from the east side of 1600 to somewhere along, I don't know, where do you stop it at? I mean, how do you,
Well,
How do you get the
not
land
only
and-
that, but then there'll be other roads that people will say, well, why don't we get the trail? Or we need the trail too.
Yeah, well, and even that section from Main Street down almost to Ira Allen, intersection there. I mean,
Yeah, there's-
sidewalk part of the way when you
Mhm.
get further down, but the part starting at Main Street is really skinny.
yeah.
I mean,
almost hits
if
you
you've got
right there on your
bikers or
bike.
runners, which there's a lot there, I mean, you got cars coming both ways, it gets pretty tight.
But eventually that will have a sidewalk, right?
Correct.
So that's the difference is those places will eventually have,
Because they're designated for it, they'll
yeah, a
have
s-
it.
a safe zone, even if they don't have it right now. The country lane will never have that unless we
so
do
there's some
stuff.
properties on that 1600 South though that don't have the sidewalk that were developed. That's in the city's master sidewalk plan to have that.
Yeah,
The city has the right of way to put that in.
we don't have the right of way in most cases, we'll have to get it.
Yeah, because
How do you accommodate pedestrian traffic in the country lane? I think that's the ultimate question, is we need to
Yeah.
accommodate pedestrian traffic on the country lane.
And I think that's, I mean, when you go to the areas that the neighborhoods are very, very defensive of that approach, you know, like this south area. Remember, we had the rezone issue that they were proposing that, and they were, you know, the idea is that on those lower volume areas that there isn't, you know, it's like it's always been in Mapleton, right? You walk on the street or just off the side of the road.
Is there a way to say that if it's a low volume country lane, you don't need those, but if there's at a certain volume, you would have to have
Have the
path
sidewalk.
or a sidewalk
Powers
or-
Park got away with only one side of the street to have a
Mhm.
sidewalk, so can you have some sort of
Yeah,
designation that
even if it's on
the volume
one
is
side.
X, then you need to have a asphalt or hard surface country lane standard bike path or
Yeah.
jogging trail or something to get pedestrian traffic. It doesn't have to be a concrete, but it could be like a DG or a crushed gravel fines pathway that, then who maintains that?
Yeah. Yeah, I think on on this one, probably the best approach would be to just recommend that we include a trail segment there, because like I said, most of this isn't developed, or isn't going to develop. It's already, you've already got homes all the way up that strip, and so there's nothing to trigger a developer from going in and putting it in. So it's the city's gonna have to make a decision one way or the other.
Yeah, I don't think there's any undeveloped land on 16 South from Main Street east.
There's two, isn't
There
there?
may be a couple.
Two little lots,
Mhm.
but it's almost all
But
developed.
it's pretty minimal. Yeah, all good thoughts.
But ultimately, when that preserve
Yeah.
develops out, the
Yeah.
traffic down that road is
It's gonna be crazy,
Yeah.
yeah.
it's gonna be not a
I mean,
country lane.
you've got to,
No,
this
but it-
has to be addressed at some point.
Yeah.
How many units?
Well,
are there?
maybe it makes sense to designate it as a major residential until Nemelka Lane, and then, you know, that gets you past the preserve's entrance.
Or make it 25 miles an hour, and that will force people to find a different route and enforce the speed limit.
Speed bumps.
Yeah, but that's, I don't think the speed limit is enough.
No.
Kids go, even on a 25-mile-an-hour zone, they still go.
Yeah.
Yeah,
On our road, people go 45.
yeah,
No, they,
Lewis goes that fast on his bike.
yeah, exactly.
So what's the difference between Maple Street and 1600 South then? like, because Maple Street's designated as a major local road. In my mind, I think 16th South is going to get just as much traffic as Maple Street heading east.
Yeah. I mean, most of the people that have kids that go to the high school, that's the road that they
That's the road.
use.
Mhm.
And, I mean, even my kids, when they go to school in the morning, that's the road they take, you know, a lot of kids do.
I take Main to 1600 to go to the high school for practice.
Yeah, I think
so-
what we want to avoid is the disaster of Maple Street East, right? I mean, you drive up there and the road's like 66 feet wide. I'm like, I don't know whoever decided that was a good idea, but it was on a master plan that it was a collector road, and at the time, that was so that, you know, you've got these little
Yeah.
narrow strips and then
Wide strip.
an airplane could land on those, and it probably did, right? And
They
pulled
took an
right into the
airplane up that
neighborhood.
street,
did.
so
Right.
it came in handy.
Saw it with my own eyes.
Didn't land there, but it,
But it came through.
yeah.
So that's why the
Yeah.
designation's important, that you just make sure that we're not oversizing. But in this
Yeah.
case, it may be an undersizing, and I'm fine with designated. I think to Maine certainly makes sense to keep it a collector, because that whole loop is UDOT maintained.
Yeah.
And then once you're going east, maybe a major residential is what you need.
So what does that, so if we suggest that, what does that then do for the future?
So if there are properties that develop, they would meet that standard. And then if the city decided to go in and improve the roadway to do the rest of it, we would meet that, same standard.
So anything that's already developed, the city's gonna have to
Yeah.
still make the determination to.
Which means you
Would-
have to go
would-
13 feet from the homeowners all up and down.
If you designated, what was it, collector, or the residential, major residential, do they have to put sidewalks on both sides? And,
Well, if the city's doing the project, we'll just decide, right? It may not
Okay.
make sense to fund that. But if one developer on one side does and one on the other side, yeah, that would be sidewalk on both sides.
I'm just trying to think, what would be would it be more cost-effective and just as safe to just have a path run up there, and would the neighbors, or the people that live there be more comfortable with that than the
Yeah.
sidewalk?
I think visually, aesthetically, it'd be a much better appearance, you know, as you're going east. It stays, you feel like you're in a
Yeah.
rural part of town.
Yeah, I agree.
You'd have a trail that would provide that safety. That's
So-
probably
My preference would be, it's fine keeping it a country lane, but have some type of wording that says that if there's a certain amount of traffic, that there'll be a path put in,
okay.
in order to maintain safety.
I agree with that. I like the ambience of a trail more so than the sidewalk. There's a
Yeah.
certain point when Mapleton reaches maximum density, and we've got twice as many residents as we do right now, that we're gonna have to address a lot of these things. But we've already established a trail system. I think that will maintain our rural look and solve the problem.
So the master trail plan, does it show going all the way down 1600 south to Highway 89?
No. No, but you could take it to Maine and connect, the trail could start at Maine. So you'd have sidewalks on Maine and 16th South to there, and then the trail would start from there and go east.
That would be,
Good compromise between curb gutter sidewalk on both sides and taking away the rural feel to the country lane standard, and that's some sort of a asphalt
If
pathway
there-
or something.
if the traffic requirement, I don't know what that would be, but.
What's the likelihood that Maine gets those improvements since those are UDOT roads?
Well, the most likely scenario is that UDOT will transfer that system over to the city at some point,
Yeah.
and the city will be funding those. The UDOT won't, they won't fund it, other than you can apply for very small grants for safe routes to school and things like that through them, but they won't build it. It'll be developers building it or the city funding it. As you mentioned, we have just done the sidewalk study, and the council's committed to putting more money towards sidewalks. So we are gonna start, at least biting off some of these.
Yeah.
You know, to do from Maple Street to 16th South in one swoop is probably not gonna happen, and that would be a pretty huge endeavor, but picking up the segments where it makes most sense to connect is what you'll see.
Yeah, okay. Well, TJ and Rich, I was almost gonna say, that kind of felt like a motion and a second there. You had some good, some good synergy going.
He's got it.
I feel like TJ should make this motion.
Well, and I'll motion that we adopt the change to the standards to add country lanes, but with a provision that will allow for paths to be built if the traffic deems it necessary. Does that seem reasonable?
I'll second it.
Okay, so we got a motion from TJ and a second from Rich. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay.
Okay, item carries. Who would have thought that'd be the, the one item that we chew on the longest?
Sorry, it's in my backyard.
No,
That's true.
that makes the big, I mean, roads make
Really good.
a huge impact on
Discussion there.
community character.
Yeah.
so.
What is the plan for that huge road up
Hold on one
Street?
second.
They-
Wait, let's get off the record here. Turn that thing off. No, it's-
Is there any plan for addressing why to make that more inviting?
Which one?